DC, good morning. Welcome into the Blitz. How you doing?
Oh, doing great, Martin. How are you this morning?
Doing well. Just we've been trying to have a little basketball conversation for a couple days, so I'm going to go ahead and get that out because if I bring up the football, we probably won't get to the basketball. So I'm going to start off with a little basketball. When it comes to Alabama, they were able to get a big win. It wasn't over a big opponent, but it was a big win because it stopped a 3-game skid. Just what's your overall assessment of the Alabama-Vanderbilt game?
Well, I mean, it was a great win because it was a win that, like you said, stopped the losing streak. We had to have that win. I don't think we played a great game in that game. I hate to say, I just didn't. I wasn't impressed with the effort that we gave in the game. I think we had the same issues in this game that we had in the losses. Just were able to overcome a lesser opponent, and that really concerns me, Martin. I think the lack of effort, and a lot of folks have been down on the players because of the lack of effort. You see people standing around, but I think it's a little deeper issue than that. I hate to say it, but I think it's a little coaching issue. I think it's a lot of mental errors, mental mistakes, and I'm not sure that offensively we really know what kind of team we are, and that's so late in the season. That kind of concerns me.
Yeah, when you talk about that's kind of been coming out here on the Blitz is the lack of identity. Sometimes we talk about certain things in football, but we don't bring those same topics over to basketball. But to me, there's two things, and I'll ask you the first one about the identity, and the second one is about the head coach and his philosophy. We last year, even though we had a great offense in football, would you say we had a clear identity of what we wanted to be in offense?
Last year in football?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that not really because I think we were torn a little bit where how we were going to get the ball down the field, and I think we were looking at passing the ball and then trying to run the ball, and we didn't have a good identity.
Right, and so when we flip that over to the hardwood, do you think Avery is struggling with a similar thing in the sense that technically we should be a better shooting team with Kyra and Petty and Ingram and Mack, but the reality of it is we've played better when we've gone inside, and are they struggling with which one they're going to be, or is it just the fact that Avery is more of a defensive coach than he is offense?
Well, I think it's two things. Coach Johnson is a great defensive-minded coach, and I think that's where his skills lie and his passion lies. And I think he's torn a little bit because in the beginning of the year I heard him talk, and he said, "Well, we're going to be a little more offensive team this year. Going to try to score more points and see us run the ball, do a little press, a little more getting up down the court." And I believe that was great to think about and talk about. The problem has been executing that and getting the players to know what is our philosophy, what's our offensive philosophy, and how we're going to attack it. Now, sometimes you change based on your personnel because you match up against 5 players.
Yeah,
you got bigger players inside. You want to shoot the outside shot. You got some matchups you can win inside. You're going to go in the paint. But that hadn't always been the case, and it doesn't seem like that's what's happened.
Right.
It seems like we've got a great offensive plan for one game. Like we go inside, we score 50 points in the paint, and then the next game you can take advantage of the same kind of makeup of the next team. Yet we're shooting threes without much consistency and throwing up, and it just doesn't make any sense. And there's what I'm talking about: coaching and having a philosophy and being able to the players to understand what that philosophy is and how you're going to execute it. I think Dante Hall is a great example in this. I think he has the potential and the upside to be one of the best players Alabama's ever had. The problem, I think, comes when he doesn't. To me, it looks like some people translate the lack of effort. To me, looking at it from the outside, looking in, it looks like to me that he's not sure what the game plan is. He's not sure of what is my role in this offensive game today, this game plan today. When you give him a sure role like he did for example, against Mississippi State, against Ole Miss, that we know what the role is going to be, he plays it well. But, just a regular open motion offense, I don't think he knows what his role is, and therefore he has a lot of standing around. Looks like a lack of effort. But he's not the only one standing around. There's a lot of players standing around. There's
right.
a lot of players got their hands on the ball that shouldn't even have their hands on the ball in critical situations. That's why there's so many bad shots being made.
Yeah, and that's the part, DC, that I kind of go, oh, wow. Once again, we're speaking with DC Capstone Report. He's our weekly co-host for Tuesdays. Kevin Smith really think has a great understanding of basketball, and he's commenting on Facebook, and he says, Avery's team has no identity, and we struggle with any continuity on offense. That's why we can't sustain leads. There's no staple that you can go to when you need a basket. If you rely just on athleticism all the time, what happens when the team you're playing is just as athletic? Fundamentals matter. And to me, that's kind of a synopsis of what Alabama has done. But I want to flip the script a little bit, DC, here. When we talk about Avery made the same statement that Nick Saban did almost, and we hadn't made the comparison between those two yet. And Nick Saban went into this past football season saying, hey, we're going to have to win different. We're going to have to win on the offensive side of the ball. You can say that, but does that mean that you can necessarily coach that way and be comfortable? And when I look at it, DC, I'm going to compare Saban first and then bring it back to basketball. In that national championship game, I've heard so many people say this, and I'd like to get your comment, and you guys can comment on this as well, James, is when I look at Nick Saban in that national championship game, it looked like the first time I've ever seen him give up. And the reason I think that happened is he's a defensive-minded coach, and even though we were saying we were going to win with offense, we had always been close enough or in the game or in the lead that he could make an adjustment on defense, and the offense was playing well enough that it would work. But he seemed like he was at a total loss because he had no answer defensively, and to me, the whole team just kind of caved off of that.
I agree with that. I think that's probably something that we saw for the first time on a Saban coach team, and I think that in reality, Coach Johnson is a great defensive coach. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when you play the offensive style of ball that they want to play to the sport level, that detracts from your defense.
Right.
And I think that's what happened in Alabama football, and I think that's what we're seeing happen in Alabama basketball. And your person who's commented on Facebook pegged it right on top of the head. We have no identity for this Alabama basketball team. And when I say we got the wrong people with the ball in their hand, I mean, we've got you got a freshman point guard that you've given the team to the reins to, who has good ball handling skills, and yet late in games, you have a player handling the ball that can't hit free throws and that can't dribble and can't make the outside shot. So, I mean, that doesn't make sense for me why you would run a motion offense for that person to have the ball. And I'm not talking about that person. That person is a great defensive player, great basketball player, has some great skill levels that can be used, mm-hmm. but not the one that you're putting him in the position to do. So that is troubling to me to see. We don't have that person that you can that the coaches allow or to say, okay, spread out. We're going to give him the ball and he can take it during his last critical times. We just don't have that.
James,
I happen to agree, DC. I mean, you look at back to the national championship game in January, and as far as the Saban quitting and the team quitting, I mean, just look at that final drive of the ball game when Clemson ran out the final 10 and a half minutes of the ball game. I mean, running the ball every play, that tells me all you need to know as far as Clemson, as Saban refers to it, making the other team quit. And then to Avery Johnson's team, there is no identity. I mean, I think it was Alex Byington that asked him in the press conference yesterday about his 8-man rotation, Avery Johnson. In fact, Avery was asked about the 8-man rotation a couple of times yesterday, and he mentioned as far as whether it's using 8 men or using 10 or 11 players in a game, whatever it took to win. That to me tells me, DC, that Avery Johnson, I'm not sure he knows what the identity of this team is.
I would agree with that. I don't think he knows. I think he's been through this many games and still can't find out what the identity of the game is. But, that team is. That translates from the coaching, though. I don't look for the players to establish the identity.
Right. I agree.
What coaches to do that.
Yeah, DC, and, Kevin Smith, and we don't – like I said, he said this about basketball, but it relates to the football. You don't have to have an identity as long as your athletes are superior. And we had 2 games where our athletes were not superior last year in football. That was Georgia and Clemson. Our athletes were superior offensively to Clemson's defense, but offensively and defensively, Clemson and Georgia matched up with us on both sides of the ball. And we struggled. We lost one and barely won the other. And I think that's where Avery is in basketball. But I just hold on one quick second to get you to comment on this, DC. Avery Johnson is trying to coach in a style that he's not comfortable with. We've won 1 game, and that was last week without scoring 70 or more points. And that was this week against Vanderbilt. And we got close to, but really we got, I think, 6 or 7 free throws down the stretch. It was really more like a 60 to 60 point game or something like that. But my point behind that is we're playing offense where we're taking a lot of fast breaks, which if we make the fast break, hey, we can get back set on defense. But when we come down on fast breaks, take bad shots, or we're taking a lot of threes, that actually, as you were saying, nullifies the defense. And so because you're giving long rebounds or you're giving, in transition, they're beating you back in transition. Just closing thoughts on that, and then we'll transition over to a little football.
Yeah, I think definitely in the basketball arena, it's a little transition. The translation from football to basketball is a little hard to make just because in basketball, your athletic team can run up against a team that can beat them anyway. Any given night,
right.
A team that's streaky shooting. Football, not so much. You're the most athletic team. You're going to
win.
Navigate through that, but not in basketball. And I think we've seen that. But that's not where the problem lies in Alabama. You don't, that team that you got down by 20 points doesn't just automatically become the best team in the world in the second half, and that has to do a lot with your own team. And that's right. What we're seeing in Alabama, putting ourselves. Sometimes we shoot ourselves in the foot, having the wrong people handle the ball, making shots we shouldn't take, running. We've had plays that worked all night, and then all of a sudden we're just running around, running a motion offense instead of working the ball in down low, where you've had the advantage all night. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I think that's got to start with the coaches. And I agree. I think Coach Johnson is a great coach, great defensive-minded coach, but he doesn't have an offensive coach on the team that has taken the reins and said, okay, this is what we're going to do on offense. But you handle defense, I'll handle offense. I think we need somebody like that to step up in the coaching staff and say, okay, this is what we got to do on offense.
Go ahead and get we do a 3-point shot with Alabama having a big game tonight against South Carolina, a physical team that sometimes starts a little slow, so maybe Alabama can take advantage of that. But they always come storming back, and is that a good thing or a bad thing for Alabama is yet to be seen. What's your 3-point shot for Alabama in this game?
Well, Martin, it's a big game on the road against South Carolina. South Carolina's had some internal problems on the team this year. I think Alabama has a chance to go in there and take advantage of that. But to do that, I think my 3-point shots in this is that, first of all, we got to go in and play a complete full game. We can't have this lapse of the halves or the tail of 2 halves. I think it's got to be a complete game. Secondly, I think we got to limit turnovers because that's a big thing that South Carolina feeds off of. And when they do come back, they usually come back based on their defensive intensity creating turnovers. So we got to limit turnovers. And third, I think most important in this game, South Carolina is a physical team. So I think we have to get Dante Hall in the paint, get some of those physical players from South Carolina, and let him do what he can do. He's very athletic. He can make some great plays. Get him the ball, get our big guards the ball down low, and let us score some points in the paint. If we do that, and I think we'll see South Carolina unravel a little bit, and we'll have a chance for a big victory on the road tonight.
Yeah, and I agree with those. I'll throw in a couple things on my 3-point shot. Is we have to match their intensity. To me, one of my biggest concerns with this year's team is we've not been a good defensive team, and to me is evident in the fact that we don't give consistent effort. Defense, a lot of times, you can have the right defensive scheme as a coach, and the players just don't give effort to jump the passing lanes or to cut off and make, the angles and to cut off the drives and, run guys off the three-point line. So to me, this game is about effort, matching their intensity, effort for 40 minutes, and effort on the defensive end. If we get that, we can play well enough offensively to beat this team. But if we don't give the effort that matches their intensity, I think they'll run us out of the gym with their physicality, because they'll make us quit even before we want to quit. So maybe Alabama. And so I'm saying effort. For 40 minutes. and in reality, turnovers a lot of times is a lack of focus and effort. It's just, you just give up. Anyway, let's move on. Speaking with DC Capstone Report. DC, yesterday we had some interesting conversation. Just kind of jumped up on us. Wasn't a planned topic or anything, but a caller, I mentioned something, and then it kind of translated from there. But it was about Tua Tagovailoa and the fact that if you go back, we've not really done this a lot this offseason, but as we get closer, we have to critique and see where Alabama has to get better. And it was brought to my attention how Tua in Mississippi State, LSU, Georgia, and Clemson, the best four defenses he played against, he really was, other than the LSU game, for the most part, was probably an average quarterback. And did not play well enough to win a championship in those games. If you just take those four, I think something like 6 for 6, 6 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Where do you see the area that Tua Tagovailoa has to improve in the most if Alabama is going to be able to contend for a national title?
Well, I think he has to mature in his being able to recognize defenses and where to throw the ball and how to take advantage of the defense that the other team's giving you. A lot of times I think, and I said it early on last year, I told you he has a great, huge upside. But there's also a downside there in that he wants to put the ball in tight spaces, and he can do that, but he can't do that consistently without giving up some picks. And I think we saw that translate in those games where you had some good defensive players that were playing. And also in some of those games, I think also is we're going to have to either do a better job protecting him, or he's going to, he seems to be, those games had some injuries that contributed. When he's injured, he doesn't seem to play well through the injury. I think it throws off his motion, throws off his time. Something gets in his head a little bit. So I think that's another thing we have to do, is protecting him. It's going to be a prime deal this year, especially with the lack of a proven backup to come in case something would happen to him in those big games. But I think really focusing on knowing defensive study, film study, knowing when to throw the ball, what to take advantage of. In other words, don't go deep every time. Take advantage of some play, because we got some playmakers on the wide receivers, Martin. That's going to be our biggest strength coming back. That you don't have to throw a 60-yard pass. You can throw a 2-yard pass. They'll turn it into a 60-yard pass. So I think that's the recognizing where to throw the ball to the open receiver and take advantage of the defense. It's his biggest strength. The biggest weakness last year that he has to get better at. And then last year, another weakness he had was if he has the option, if he's given the option of running or passing, when the run, when the pass, as far as when to hand the ball off on the RPOs, if they do that this year. I'm not convinced yet that's going to be the biggest part of our offense as it was last year.
I hope not. I would rather see a running game that kind of downhill, when linemen know when they're running it the majority of the time. I'm not saying totally get rid of the RPO, because some teams it's a weakness for them because they have aggressive linebackers and you can really take advantage of it. But I hope it's not a major part of the offense as a philosophy. You mentioned about injuries, and it came up yesterday about the injuries, and a couple people called in and commented that he was soft. I took the devil advocate and said, is he soft or is he injury prone, which is two different things. And What are your thoughts in terms of that? And, of course, it's strictly just an opinion on our part.
I don't think he's soft. I don't think he's soft. I don't think he showed that side of him in anything I've ever seen him play. Looking back at all his film, it never showed to me that he's soft. I think that he had some injuries, and a lot of times, when you get injured, Martin, in one particular area, you compensate for that, and when you compensate for that, you're often injured in another area because of the stress that you're putting on the other joints in your body trying to compensate for the other. So I think we saw him get some injuries to his hand early in the season. I think he tried to compensate with his legs. I think by doing so, he injured his legs and eventually injured. When you're trying to be so careful, oftentimes you get injured other ways, and I think we saw that happen. So I don't know whether he's injury prone or just the fact that he had the initial injury put him in a position that allowed him to be injured more. And a lot of that is, we didn't protect him as well as we could have or should have, sometimes on our offensive line. And I think that's, again, a part of the philosophy of playing these RPOs. I think offensive linemen are different, in a different scheme.
I think we keep saying that we didn't protect him as well, but Tua was better protected than – he didn't get sacked that often, comparatively speaking, till late. And I think some of what we call lack of protection sometimes got into the fact that I don't think he was as mobile, and they had kind of depended on that, which is also part of the game. But I guess I see the protection thing a little different than a lot of people because Tua went down the stretch for quite a while where he had fewer sacks than any quarterback I remember recently in Alabama. But when we come back, DC, I want to get your thoughts on what area Alabama has to improve the most if they're going to win a championship. I don't think defense is going to be significantly improved over last year. It could be, but we'll talk about that more right here on the Blitz. You listen to Martin Houston with the Blitz and DC Capstone Report. You can find DC Capstone Report at dccapstonereport.com. As we were going to break, talking about where Bama needs to improve. First of all, if the Alabama offense plays consistently without much improvement, but consistent, and what I mean by if they play at the level they played at the majority of last year, will that be enough to get this team back into the big show?
Well, I think on offense, we weren't a bad offense last year. I think if we play the way we did last year consistently and we limit our mistakes, I think that'll be enough to get us back to the playoff. I don't know if it'll be enough to win the playoff if we don't change our offensive philosophy a little bit to help our defense. I still think our defense is going to have a hard time this year just because of some of the people we lost and having to replace them. Now, I know last year we all were worried about replacing so many people, and it turned out pretty good, but I don't think our defense played at its best throughout the season. And I think we're going to have to improve on defense in order to have a championship caliber team.
And do you and I agree with that statement. It's kind of interesting. Here we are. We're looking at a guy that had 3,966 yards, 43 touchdowns, and 6 interceptions. But we're saying that if Alabama's going to win, do you agree or disagree with this statement? Tua Tagovailoa has to be better than 3,966 yards, 43 touchdowns, and only 6 touchdowns if Alabama's going to win a national title this year.
Yeah, I think our offense is going to have to be better. It's going to have to carry us. It's going to have to help the defensive along during the season. I really believe that. I know he only had 6 interceptions. Those 6 interceptions, though, came in the games that were against the most top defenses. So I think my point is our offense is going to have to be played better against the top defenses for us to win the national championship.
I agree with that. Tua Tagovailoa against the average opponent, he had 235.4, 238.7, as high as 316.9 QBR. Against Arkansas, it was 394. And then from Missouri, with the exception of the Citadel and Auburn, Tennessee was just under 200. But then against LSU, DC, he was 129.5. And here's the thing: these ratings actually aren't necessarily disastrous. It just was a huge drop off from what he was doing. But we were a team that needed him to have big QBR. He was 129.5, 138.5 against LSU and Mississippi State. And then against Georgia, he was 92.3. And that's the key, is the stats have to be equal out against the top opponents. Other than Tua Tagovailoa, though, because it by no means was last year's season and coming up short on him alone. Where else does Alabama have to improve if they're going to be able if they're going to win it all this year?
Well, on our offense, we're going to have to improve our running game. I think it's got to have a dedicated downhill running game to help with game management, clock management, help our defense stay off the field. So I think we're going to have on offense have better running game. We've got to find a tight end. I think people don't realize we lost Hell Hinges and Irvin Smith. That's a critical part of our offense. We're going to have to find a tight end that is at least as good or better than those players to be able to compete offensively. On defense, we're going to have to find a signal caller that can call the plays and play. I don't know. It remains to be seen if Dylan Moses can do that. A lot of folks can play, but there's not many players that can be like a Reggie Ragland or Sean Deion Hamilton that can call the defense and still make the play. And I think that's what we need to find on defense to do that. And I think we're going to have to up our pass rushing ability on defense. I think we've made some strides in the offseason. It remains to be seen how it translates on the field with the additions, signees, and the red shirts that are coming up. But that's going to have to be better than last year in order to compete in these big games.
When you look at this team, Robert Saucier said the talent level and play calling are unknowns, but he thinks coaching will be better. However, experience going into the season is a huge drop-off. Does Alabama's schedule, when you look at it, both from 2 points, in the short run, what's your thoughts on it making this team better? But in the long run, does it help or hurt?
Well, in the short run, I think it's going to give a chance for our defense and our offense to gel quickly. I don't think we're going to have as big of a challenge going in, maybe Texas A&M, but before we get to LSU, we're not going to have as big a challenge. I don't believe. I think that'll be our first pivotal game to see if we gelled and come together. So, in the long run, though, is that non-challenging schedule going to help us down the road? I hope we get a challenge against Duke. I'm not sure we got it down against Louisville last year. I believe when we've lined up and played against these tough teams in the very first game, it's helped us down the road because our focus has been so much on getting better for that first game. And so I hope it doesn't hurt us this year.
And you just nailed something, DC. How focused will this team be compared to the times when they've had the Florida States of the world and the Michigans of the world as that tip-off versus Duke? And is that going to hurt us?
It's very possible. Might even hurt us in the Duke game if we're not careful. All
right, DC now.
Well, I'm just being honest. I'm being honest with you. We've got to get our focus, and I think Coach Saban, I've always said this before, I've said it several times on the show, Coach Saban coaches much better coming off a loss than he does coming off a victory. I think he'll have the team ready to play. But if we're not, we could be shocked in some of these early games if we don't get our team mentally and physically ready. And, we don't know how it's going to translate until we get that field. You can work in the off season all you want to. You can scheme, you can coach. But until you get slapped in the mouth that first time on that first play, you don't really know how your team's going to react.
Yes,
I think we'll be ready. I just want our fans to know that, having a USC to prepare for, having a Florida State to prepare for, in these kids' minds is much different than having a Duke to prepare for. And I just think that's the truth.
All right, DC, what you got coming up?
Well, on the podcast this week, we're going to take a look at our the offensive side of the ball a little bit on what to look back, our returning starters, returning players who might be starters this year, and we're going to take a look at what we need to do to improve, or what areas on offense we need to improve to compete for the national championship. All
right, that's DC Capstone Report, DCCapstoneReport.com. You can also follow him at David Cott 50. That's David COT 50. Thanks, DC. We'll catch up with you next week.
Thanks, Martin, and Roll Tide.